events are heightened. Not only do we have a general election, probably the most important general election that this generation has seen, but also of what's happened yesterday in London Bridge, and obviously the media frenzy, and to an extent I was even asked to come and do an interview at this time, but I said no, this is inshallah more important. Add to that the fact that there are political events in several Muslim countries today that we can't ignore and we can't admit to be part of, whether it be the ongoing crises and ongoing tests and tribulations of Palestine and Kashmir, the Uyghur, the Rohingya, or the upcoming and new events of the past 7-8 years, Syria, Yemen, Lebanon, Libya, various other Muslim countries. Almost every single country has an issue now. Or we have emerging events in countries like Lebanon, Iraq, Sudan, Algeria, and the such. And therefore, basically, it's very difficult not to be interested, engrossed in, involved with, or interacting with any of those events that are taking place. It's very, very difficult. I find it almost impossible for any Muslim, based upon the values that we believe in, to distance themselves from all of these issues. I know that some are involved with one, others are involved with more than one, others are involved with everything. But it's important that we realize the context of time and of place. It's very, very important. The Prophet ﷺ stated in the authentic hadith narrated by Muslim, عجبا لأمر المؤمن عجبا لأمر المؤمن إن أمره كله له خير فإذا أصابته سراء شكر فكان خيرا له وإذا أصابته ضراء صبر فكان خيرا له. The Prophet ﷺ states that how wondrous is the affair of a Muslim. Everything that happens to a Muslim, is good. If something good befalls upon him or her, they will be thankful, and that is good. And if something negative befall upon him or her, they will be patient, and that is also for them good. And therefore, when we look around us and we see these calamities, these oppressions, these problems, we remember this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that tells us actually not just that we should be patient when things go bad, or we should be thankful when things go good, but that things will go good and things will go bad. That is a certainty. Not just because we're a Muslim, it means that everything will be good, or that everything will be bad. We, just like all human beings, we will be tested with good and with bad. But what differs us is the fact that our devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes us deal with those good things and bad things in a particular way that makes it good for us. And when we come to talk about politics, and I know that some of you might not want to talk about politics, not like to talk about politics, get bored when you hear or when you become part of a discussion about politics. But this is the title of my speech, so bear with me for the next half hour. When we talk about politics, we're not talking about anything that is outside of Islam. Actually, I would propose that it is very much part of Islam, regardless of whether the issue at hand is Islamic or a Muslim issue or not. Being part of politics is very much part of acting out our faith and devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In Surah Hud, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the affair of Shu'aib alayhi salam. Shu'aib alayhi salam was sent to his people in order to remind them of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the divinity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also to forbid them from an evil act that they were involved in. Who remembers what the evil act of the people of Shu'aib was?
Financial
discrepancies. Yes, they used to cheat in the marketplace. Essentially, if just to give you an example, if I went to buy a kilo of tomatoes, the vendor would sell me 750 grams. And I would be okay with that. And I would pay for a kilo, 1,000 grams. But I know that I'm only getting 750. So imagine. And this is just a small example, but essentially cheating in the marketplace in selling and buying was extremely common, and therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not only sent them a messenger, imagine, He sent them a messenger in order to forbid them and remind them that what they are doing is extremely dangerous and that it contradicts the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam an entire surah. Who remembers what the surah is? Al-Mutaffifin. Waylun lil-Mutaffifin. Those who cheat in the marketplaces, they must be warned. Waylun. Allah said, this is a huge word in Arabic. Wayl. It's a big threat, and imagine, the issuer of the threat is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Waylun lil-Mutaffifin. So sometimes we can imagine grave sins, but we sometimes think of other things as being little. They're not that important. It's okay. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by sending Shu'aib alayhi salam, in order to remind His people to correct their ways in their financial dealings, tells us and sends us a message of how important this is. So after telling them and spending a long time with His people, they got sick and tired of Him. Every day coming to the marketplace and ruining their transactions, and so they decided, they met, the elders of the people, they met and they made a decision. And the decision was to expel Shu'aib and his family. Basically, they'd kick them out. And back then, if someone was kicked out of London, they'd go to Birmingham. Back then, if someone is expelled from their people, they go to the desert and they die. There is nowhere else that they can go. So once they went to Shu'aib and told him, Ya Shu'aib, we want you out. What was his response? He said to them, إن أريد إلا الإصلاح ما استطعت وما توفيقي إلا بالله. All I want, he was telling them, he was saying, why did you issue this decree, this order? Why did you issue it against me and my family? Why? All I want was your betterment, al-islah, your reformation, your enhancement, your development. All these words come under the title Islah. إن أريد إلا الإصلاح ما استطعت. All I wanted was your betterment and your development to the utmost of my ability. وَمَا تَوْفِيقِي إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. And my success, I might have failed, but any success that happens is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What Shu'aib was involved with, what Shu'aib was doing, was essentially political. His whole pursuit of Islah was political. Anything that has to do with Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi anil Munkar, as we are all commanded, is essentially political. So to say, I don't get involved in politics is a fallacy. It's false. First of all, you can't not be involved in politics. It's not up to you. Everything around you. Even when you complain to the council about your bins not being collected, that's political. Even when you get together with your community, with your next door neighbors, in order to complain that there are too many potholes that damage your cars and are a threat to those who have special needs. That is political. When you complain that you're paying too many taxes for very little in return, that's political. When you make a complaint that your hospital or clinic or local GP are not providing the kind of health services that you need, that's political. So everything, our education, our schools, when we submit some sort of complaint that the education syllabus contains things that we do disagree with, that's political. Everything that we do, everything that we interact with is political. So if you think about it, every single one of us is actually involved in politics, whether we like it or not, whether we know it or not. So it's very important for us to realize, how is it possible that we, being already involved, how can we do the perfect job? إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ إِذَا عَمِلَ أَحَدُكُمْ عَمَلًا أَنْ يُتْقِنَهُ. Allah loves that if anyone committed any deed, did anything, that they perfect it. So it's no good doing things in a very mediocre fashion, just by averages. If we do something, we do it perfectly. If we're cooking a meal, if we're having a feast, if we're going out for a leisurely fun day, we do it perfectly. So how do we do politics as perfectly as possible? First of all, we have to understand who we are. Who are we part of? We are part of a Muslim community here in Britain. Some of us are here just for a little while whilst we finish our affairs, our jobs, our posts, our degrees, and then probably we're heading back home or maybe going somewhere else. Some of us are here to stay. In any case, it is vital that wherever we are, whether for a day or whether for 10 years or more, I've been in this country for 50 years, it's important that for however long time or short time we are here, or anywhere else, that we act out, that we enact, we manifest our Islam, our belief. And if our belief tells us that part of our faith is to enjoin what is good and to forbid what is evil, then we must do that. So the British Muslim community in Britain, in 2021, inshallah, we'll have the next census, and we'll see that there are close to 4 million Muslims in the UK. That makes us just about 6%, 5%, 6% of the British population. That is a sizable figure. That is a sizable figure. And it's growing, by the way. And it's growing faster than any other faith community. But what's the use of numbers when the effort, when the produce, when the product is weak or poor or negative even? It's of no use. Those numbers become meaningless. It's important to understand, when we talk about the Muslim community, it's important to understand several things. The first is, and by the way, not only for us, but also imagine what the Muslim community means for the government, what the Muslim community means for politicians, what the Muslim community means for the media, what the Muslim community means for political leaders. That's what's important, especially at an election time. Why is 4 million people important? Why is people who abide by a particular faith important to all these sectors? Why is it important? It's important because one thing is that the British Muslim community, as you well know, is diverse. I come from probably the Arab Muslim community. You come from the Indian Muslim community. Others come from the Pakistani Muslim community. Others come from the Bangladeshi Muslim community. Others come from the indigenous British white Muslim community. Others come from the Afro-Caribbean. When I'm heading tomorrow to Brixton, I'm going to be meeting brothers and sisters from the Afro-Caribbean Muslim community. There's the Albanian and Turkish Muslim community I was with last week. There's the European Muslim community from France and from Germany and from Holland. We are diverse. We're not just from one particular town or city or village or the such. We can't be classified under one very simple label. We're expansive. Amongst us are those who are, mashallah, very rich and powerful. Others not so much. There are those who have PhDs and are professors in their respective fields. Others haven't finished their GCSEs. There are those who work in very well-paid jobs and others who are unemployed. We're not just one single label. We are diverse, and that is a source of power. Because if we all did one job, if we all had sort of a similar educational attainment, if we all had a very sort of harmonious, similar kind of economic status, then it would be very easy to issue one law or one policy for the Muslims, and khalas, the government or the media could deal with them. But we're not. We all have our diverse issues. In fact, I'm now involved in a negotiation between one sector, very important sector of the Muslim community, and the larger Muslim community. It's no secret that the majority, not overwhelming majority, but the majority of the Muslim community intends to vote Labour. That's no secret, it's well known. Probably I would say 55 to 60% of Muslims, without having data or done a survey. There is a very important part of the Muslim community that has a very big problem with the Labour Party. And it issued a statement and it spoke from one or two mosques against voting for the Labour Party. And there was a big discussion. How could you do this? This is not allowed. You shouldn't be doing this. You're going to bring back Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. All these things. So now we're negotiating between the two. We're different. And that's a good thing, by the way. The worst thing that some people, I don't know whether they hope or they have the ambition to, is to make us all think alike. We all have the same taste, we all have the same decision. We need to be all unified as though I need to look like you, think like you, eat like you, walk like you, act like you. That is not the way that Allah created us. Allah created us different. Allah created us with different tastes, different aptitudes. كُلٌّ مُيَسَّرٌ لِمَا خُلِقَ لَهُ. Each and every one of you is guided in a way in which Allah created them. This is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So, and this is a source of strength. So basically the government can't just meet with me, sit with me, make a decision and then say, oh, we met with the Muslim community. They can't do that. If we were all the same, they could, but we're not. And therefore they can't. They have to meet with me, with you, with you, with you, with you, in order then to say, we met with some parts of the Muslim community. And that's a source of strength. Don't think that that's a source of weakness or of division, not at all. As long as the ultimate objective that we have, the ultimate dream and aspiration and vision is similar, then we are unified. It doesn't matter whether you take this entrance or that exit or the such, but as long as we meet at the end, it doesn't matter, it's fine. Then we are, inshallah, in unity. The other source of strength is the fact that the Muslim community is one of the greatest contributors to the United Kingdom, historically as well as contemporary. As taxpayers, we pay billions in taxes every single year towards the economy. As people who fought even for Britain in the First and Second World Wars, Muslims compromised hundreds of thousands of the troops that fought around the world. Who built the trains, the railways? Who built the factories? It was built upon Muslims who arrived from Yemen, from India, from the subcontinent, Indian subcontinent. It was built upon their shoulders. So, when some politicians, and I'm going to try not to name names, but I'm sure that you can guess what I'm talking about. When some politicians, or some sectors of the media, when they suggest that somehow we are all immigrants and that we are a liability upon the UK economy, or that somehow we're not integrated and as such, they're speaking down to us as though we have just newly arrived in order to take money from out of the economy through benefits and as such. We know that's a falsehood, and we should speak up that that is a great, great, great falsehood. A few years ago, I was invited to the 120th anniversary of one of Britain's mosques. So what does that mean? It means that Britain's earlier mosque, or one of the earliest mosques, it's not the oldest, one of the earliest mosques was built 120 years ago. Brothers and sisters who are involved in constructing mosques today, with today's technology, with today's facilities, know that it takes years to build a mosque. Which means that those Muslims had arrived even earlier than 120 years ago. So, without going into too much detail, and we can, we are part and parcel of Great Britain and the United Kingdom as we see it today. Every single facet, every single element. The third important fact about the Muslim community is the fact that the Muslim community reaches everywhere because we're different. Those of us who are academics, those of us who are doctors, those of us who are engineers, those of us who are artists, those of us who are singers, those of us who are athletes, those of us who contribute towards the environment, those of us who are politicians, those of us who are in the media. Wherever you look today, you find Muslims. Wherever you look. And that is to the great aptitude of the community, and also because of our faith. Because we believe that we must touch on every single element of life. That it's crucial that we leave no corner of life untouched. And that whenever we get involved in anything, that we believe that we must be the best, we must perfect our missions. And that's why we have thousands upon thousands in every single industry that you can think about. I was surprised, a number of years ago actually, I was invited by a group of Muslims who worked in the financial sector in the city of London, which is the financial capital of the entire world. So I went and I was mesmerized. I thought they were going to have a small room in a basement of some building or the such. I was met in a very beautiful, shiny, clean, huge building by 3 people who worked in that financial institution. I was taken up to the 42nd floor, and we were in the penthouse, and I was looking around, seeing the sky, the skyscape of London, the landscape of London. And and everyone who came in, mashallah, looked like they were very rich people. And when I asked, this brother was a head of a division within this bank, and this brother was involved with a hedge fund that was worth £5 billion, and this brother was an investment banker responsible for I don't know what. So I asked him, I said, how many Muslims are there in this part of town that I knew nothing about before? And one of them said, and this was like in 2014 or 2015, he said, we have 21,000 Muslims working in the City of London. From janitors and doorkeepers to CEOs and directors, everything. That's a fantastic thing. So, Muslims are everywhere. And the government or policymakers or decision makers, they want people who are part of every segment of society. That's to the power of the Muslim community. Okay, and we can talk more and more, but for the element of time, where are we at today? Amongst the list of issues and challenges that I mentioned, we as Muslims, we have to concentrate on 3 areas. And this is, by the way, I'm not asking you to do something which is extraordinary. This is something that you will find makes sense. It's natural. It goes without saying. The first is we need to care about our country. We need to care about the land and the people on which and within whom we live. This is our Islam. If any of us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted us to live in Russia, in Siberia, in Chile, in Australia, in South Africa, in Nigeria, in Sweden, wherever we live, we must, by the commandment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we must care, love, protect, and be compassionate about the land where we live, because this is our house. This is our house. And if la samahallah, God forbid, if this house became polluted, became unsafe, became riddled with disease, became riddled with crime, then we are going to be affected. If I live on the banks of a river, and the river became polluted, then I can't drink from that river. And everyone else will suffer the same consequence. So we must love the land on which we live. And we must love and feel mercy and empathy with everyone who lives on the same land. We must. I am often mesmerized and bemused by those who say, no, we must hate those because they're not Muslims. We must hate. And I say, what kind of Islam do you believe in? What kind of Allah, what kind of God, what kind of Rabb do you pray to? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who commanded us to make da'wah. To make da'wah. And this concept alone, let me just elaborate on just for a minute or two. Imagine you're buying a present for a loved one. Imagine. There's a loved one, a relative, a friend, a neighbor, a colleague, someone whom you feel attachment to. And there is an anniversary, a wedding, an engagement, a birthday coming up, and you want to buy them a gift. There is Eid coming up, there is Ramadan coming up, whatever it is, and you want to buy them a gift. How long will you spend thinking about that gift, and how much, in terms of expenses, will you pay for that gift? Normally, and I think it makes sense, that the closer that person to you is, the greater the gift. And the more time you'll be spending thinking of that gift. So when, for instance, it's one of your parents, you'll be thinking from weeks ahead of their birthday. Weeks ahead, you'll be thinking, okay, what do I get? And maybe asking some of your siblings and making sure that you're going to get something special that they remember. And then maybe searching online and getting ideas from your friends and colleagues and spending so much time. It makes sense. One of your children, your spouse, and this, I'm presuming that you love your spouse, so I'm going to count them in. So the closer they are to you, the more you love them, the greater the gift and the more time you'll spend thinking about that gift. If they're just someone that you've met once or twice and they've invited you to the wedding of someone, you're just going to pick up a gift card of £10 or maybe £15. Just give it to them. That's alhamdulillah, you've done your bit. It won't, you'll probably pick it up on the way to the wedding or to the event itself. So, what if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded you to give the greatest gift ever to someone? The greatest gift being da'wah, being Islam, being paradise, Jannah. Is there a gift that is greater than this? And Allah commands you to give it to your next door neighbor, to your colleague at work, to your friend who you meet, to the person that you interact with. How could you hate them? How could you hate them if you're going to give them the greatest gift ever known to man? Greater than the gift you're going to give to your mother or father. Greater than the gift that you're going to give to your son or daughter. Greater than all of that. How could you hate them? How could you despise them? You have to love them. And by the way, da'wah is not just speaking. Not sitting down and reading from the Quran to them. That's not da'wah. Da'wah is actually being at other people's service. You help them out. You care for their needs. You see them worried and you ask them, why are you worried? What can I do to help? You be at their service. That is the greatest form of da'wah. Not saying a hadith or telling a story of the seerah or the such. That's not da'wah. People will, they'll switch off after 20, 30 seconds. Da'wah is being there. And you only be there for people whom you love. And therefore, wherever we are, we care for where it is that we are, and we care for who it is that we share this place with. That is a fundamental of Islam. So we care for our country. And part of that care is caring that it doesn't do wrong. So when I stand up and tell my government, you are wrong and you shouldn't be doing this, it is because of my love and care and compassion for the land and the people who live on it. In 2003, I was one of the leaders of the anti-war movement against Iraq. And some of you might, I don't know whether you were there or you remember, we had more than 2.5 million people on the streets of London protesting against the war in Iraq. At the time, I was interviewed by many sections of the media, and I said, it's not because I was born in Iraq, and I was. It's not because I'm an Arab, and I am. It's not even because I'm a Muslim, and I am. But it's because I'm British, and I do not want my country to do an evil act that it will come to suffer the consequences of in the future. I don't want my children and the children of my neighbors to suffer economically, financially, security-wise or the such because of a wrongdoing and an evil act that my government is doing today. And that was true. I wasn't selling myself or trying to be gimmicky to the media. It was true. And it still is true. Today, when I vote for this candidate and not for that candidate, it's not because I have a preference in terms of colour, or that because this candidate is probably a Muslim or is married to a Muslim. That has nothing to do with it. This is because I care immensely for my country and its future, and I care for the people on it. And we need to care about what happens. We need to care about the financial system. We need to care about the economy. We need to care about the climate and the environment. We need to care about our safety and security. We need to care about our education and our hospitals and our schools. How can you not care? I met a brother and a sister a few weeks ago, actually, after an event that I spoke at. And they came to me and said, Wallahi, Dr. Anas, inshallah, this country will burn. And I say, I don't understand you. Where do your children go to school? If it burns, your children will burn. It's very strange to me. I don't understand this. Oh, Allah, inshallah, He will curse them, and He will... Well, if Allah curses these people, we're living amongst them. We're driving on the streets with them. We use the same facilities that they do. So we're preying upon ourselves. This is terrible. This is terrible. So we must care about Britain. Secondly, we must care about the world. We must care about the world, because whether we like it or not, now, if something happens in Russia, it will come to affect us. If something happens in America, it will come to affect us. Those of you who remember 11 years ago when the financial crisis happened, why did it happen? Because there were two banks or financial institutions in America, many of whom most people had never heard of in their lives. They collapsed. And when they collapsed, the entire world suffered. The entire world suffered. People lost their homes here in London because of what happened in America. People lost their homes in Japan because of what happened in America. So we need to care about the world. We need to care about the United Nations and what it decides and how it acts. We need to care about what the governments of Europe and America and the such do. We need to care about China and Russia and the such. We must care about those governments. And also because Muslims today, they are everywhere. Everywhere. 1.65 billion Muslims. That's 1,650 million Muslims around the world in every spot that you can imagine. I was at a conference 2 years ago which had Muslims coming from Hawaii, from Tahiti, from Nicaragua, from Mongolia, from China, from everywhere, countries that sometimes I had never heard of. There were Muslims from there. So we must care about what happens around the world. And finally, we as Muslims, we must care about the affairs of Muslims everywhere. We must care about the affairs of Muslims. مَنْ لَمْ يَهْتَمَّ بِأَمْرِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ فَلَيْسَ مِنْهُمْ. So we need to have this balanced view. I care about my country, I care about the world, and I care about my co-Muslims, the people who believe in the same way that I believe in. Which means that I act in a balanced way also. I care about what's happening in Palestine, but I must also care about what's happening to another non-Muslim, non-Arab country that comes under occupation. I must, otherwise, what's the use of my Islam? I'm double standards, I'm hypocritical. So this is one of the challenges that we face today. How can we be just? How can we be measured and balanced? How can we care for everyone and everything? Basically, today, when I go around and speak to Muslims about the general elections, all I'm asking them to do is to act as Muslims. That's all I'm asking them to do. I do not ask even my sons who to vote for. They ask me and I tell them I'm going to vote for this and that's why. I explain to them. One of them is convinced with my view, the other isn't. Absolutely. Alhamdulillah. As long as he knows why he will be voting for whatever candidate, that's absolutely fine. I'm asking Muslims everywhere today to be politically engaged, not only in the general election, but then following up afterwards, asking the candidates that we voted for and elected, what have they done? Have they lived by their promises? Have they lived by their pledges? And then, when the next round of general elections come, I know whether to re-vote for that person or to find someone else and tell them, I'm not voting for you this time because you failed to live up to your promises. Basically, I want us to act as Muslims. And there is this discussion going around, and I hear it, that we are British citizens, we live in Britain, we mustn't talk about foreign issues too much. This is a very, very poor argument. This is a very poor argument. We are human beings. We care for 20, 30, 40 things. We don't have one single identity. And if I care about Britain, then I would care about what Britain does in Palestine, what Britain does in Kashmir, what Britain does for the Rohingya, what Britain does for the Uyghur. So in a way, you can't extract yourself from one area to another. And plus, every other British person, they care about their country, of course, but they also care about human rights. They care about certain animals and the environment. They care about the flooding of rivers and the melting of icebergs and the such, which are beyond British borders. So if you really want to be British, then that's what you need to be. You need to care about an array of things, not just one thing. Brothers and sisters, we live in both a very interesting and intriguing and fascinating time, and at the same time we live in a very difficult and challenging time. So whilst the news might be negative, whilst we may be talking about Islamophobia and about the rhetoric of the government and the rhetoric of the President of the United States, and about sisters and brothers coming under attack, and about Christchurch and what's happened, and we may be highlighting these news and they play in our minds and they give us this impression that things are so bad, but at the same time, I assure you, and I see, I go, I travel, I see, we have a younger generation that is absolutely fantastic. Many fathers and mothers might be disappointed in their children. Oh, you're not doing like what we used to do, and we're very angry, we're very frustrated with our children because they're not like us. Let me tell you this, they're not supposed to be like you. They're not supposed to be like me. They will have their own life and their own times and their own challenges, and they need to find their way. And their ways will be far more adapted and fit and appropriate for the times and the challenges than what I know. Some brothers and sisters ask me from time to time, oh, Brother Anas, there used to be so many protests and marches, and now nothing. I say, because we're in different times. Back then, that was the way to do it. Now, we need to find different ways and different things in order to press on our message. It's very simple. So let's be positive. Let's be hopeful. Islam is a call to action. Yes, we spend time on the prayer mat. Our face is directed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that is in order to be filled with energy that then allows us to go and act. Spending our lives on the prayer mat means nothing whatsoever. When the Prophet ﷺ saw one of the Sahabis whom he didn't know, but he was there day in, day out, in the mosque of the Prophet ﷺ. So he then asked the Sahaba, he said, who is this man? And they said, oh, he is so-and-so. They named him. And he is someone who loves Allah, loves his Prophet, and he loves prayer. And he is now making i'tikaf. He loves making i'tikaf. So he virtually never leaves the masjid. It's a beautiful act of worship, the i'tikaf. Be totally devoted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ then asked his Sahaba, he said, well, when does he eat, or how does he eat? And they say, oh, he has a younger brother who comes every day with some food and a fresh change of clothes. The Prophet ﷺ responded, أَخُوهُ خَيْرٌ مِنْهُ. His brother is far better than he is. So the mere act of worship means absolutely nothing if not accompanied, absolutely, with action. We must be active. That is how we manifest Islam. We read in the Holy Quran time and time and time again, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Those who believe and do good. The doing good is this. And part of our faith and part of our action is being political. Jazakum Allah khair for listening attentively. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless your gathering, reward you all for the times and the efforts that you are spending here. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raise all our levels and accept us amongst those who are good. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Please let's make best use of the opportunity with us today. We don't want to waste any time, which is why we've given tea and snacks now. Any questions from the audience? Yes, please.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm very keen to know the doctor's political stand and the reason behind it. Which candidate would he be voting for and why? Thank you.
This is delicious. That's my political stand. I think it's very, very important that the next phase in British politics, that we do not have a conservative government with an absolute majority. This is very, very important. And therefore, anyone who asks me the similar question, I would say it's important to vote for a candidate that would ensure that the Conservative candidate doesn't win. In my constituency, I'm going to be voting Labour, despite the fact that I have great reservations against the Labour candidate. But I'm going to be voting Labour because they are the only party in my constituency that can win. Apart from the Conservatives, of course. So that's my political stand. I believe that in Scotland, most Muslims and most of my friends will be voting for the SNP, and I think that that's right. And I think that in certain areas, for instance in Leeds, there's going to be a Liberal Democrat candidate who has the chance of defeating Conservatives. So that might be the best. In Brighton, for instance, there's going to be the Greens, who are going to be the best standing to defeat the Conservatives. So I'm not telling anyone to vote for this party or for a particular candidate. I think that it's in everyone's interest, in the country's interest, that we do not have a Conservative government with an absolute majority.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the ladies also that you'd like? Mics will be available. Yes.
Sorry. But do you not think it would be better if we all agreed on something? I mean, you said the number of Muslims we have in the UK, millions of Muslims, rather than dividing our votes. Don't you think it would be better if we all came to a conclusion. I appreciate it's not easy, but rather than dividing our votes, wouldn't it make a better impact?
Yes.
If we stood together?
It's a very, very good point, and it's a point that many, many people believe in absolutely. And many people are working towards that. And essentially, who believe in that, they're saying, vote for Labour. That's what they're saying. However, I know for a fact that in many, many areas, Labour do not stand a chance of winning. After the Conservatives, it's either the Greens or the Lib Dems. So a vote for Labour will be a vote wasted, I feel. So, and I would rather that, now, if you want to ask me in a private capacity, I think I'll say the same. But especially Muslim organizations should not be partisan. Should not say, we're all for the Lib Dems, we're all for the Conservatives, we're all for Labour. They should never say that. I think it's very, very important that we leave people to make their own decisions. Like I said, in my household, I have a son who is, I think, I'm not sure how he's going to tick the box, but he has expressed views similar to mine. My other son disagrees, and therefore he'll be voting differently. So it's very important that we allow for people to make their own decisions. It's very important that we inform people, and we tell them why. I, for instance, had the brother not asked me, I wouldn't have said. But he asked me, so I'm telling you. But otherwise, the main thing is that we check the record of every... And also, by the way, the system of our elections in Britain is unique. So we can only unify on a constituency-to-constituency basis. I can't ask all the Muslims throughout the country to unify. But I can ask the Muslims in my own constituency, who pray in my mosque, to unify on a single candidate. That's the peculiarity between our system here in Britain and, let's say, in France or other European countries.
Can I also ask, is it fair to say that the point that you are also making is that irrespective of whoever comes to power, our interests become an important electoral issue?
Absolutely. Now, this issue that you raised is crucial in terms of our strategic approach to politics. What are our interests as Muslims? What are our interests? How do we decide what our interests are? For instance, I met with the Libyan community from Libya just a couple of weeks ago. And someone was saying, we must vote as Libyan British Muslims, and we must support the party that we think is better for Libya. So for them, their interests is based around Libya. I've spoken with some Kashmiri brothers and sisters. They feel that they will support the candidate, regardless of the party, they will support the candidate that presents Kashmir and the interest of Kashmir, and that is their interest. Whilst I acknowledge all of this, I accept all of this, but the interest of the British Muslim community must be more complex. What is the state of our schools? What is the state of our hospitals? What is the state of our roads? What is the state of our current security and all of these things? That's very important. Yes, how does Britain behave in Muslim countries, whether it be Iraq or Palestine or China, or I mean for the Muslim minorities in China, in Bangladesh, in Saudi Arabia? How does it behave with Muslim cases and Muslim issues? How does it behave on the world scene? So our interests, I believe, are far more complex. They are a mixture, and that's why I mentioned we must be active and interested in local issues, global issues, and Muslim issues. These three elements must be the decider on what the construct of our interests are.
Assalamu alaikum. I agree with some of your points and I strongly disagree with your points arguing the parties like Greens, Liberal Democrats, they have a chance of winning.
Yes.
We all know that Greens party, except the seat Caroline Lucas is contesting, they don't have any chance to win any other seat in entire UK. Same way with Liberal Democrats, they may win 10 or 12, maximum 15 seats. Rest of the seats, they're just contesting as a vote cutter, divide the votes. So how, on what basis you are telling people you can vote Liberal or Greens?
Jazakallah khair. That's one of the questions that various Muslim organizations, and I was with them, discussed for several weeks, I would suggest. We went one constituency, we discussed, there are, where there is a Muslim presence, there are approximately 190 constituencies where there is a strong Muslim presence. Okay, Muslims are present in more than 500 constituencies, but I'm talking about 190 to 195 constituencies where there is a strong Muslim presence. And we discussed them each. Okay? We decided, Allahu A'lam, that out of those 190, there are 100 constituencies. Now that's 100 out of 600, that's 18%. Where the Muslim vote, if it's well studied, well organized, it can have an impact on the ultimate outcome. I'll give you an example. In one of those constituencies, there are, I think, 700 Muslims. Only 700. But the difference between, in the last elections in 2017, the difference between the winning party and the second is 300 votes. It means that the Muslim community, if they manage to get unified, they can impact either way. Now, that's one thing. So we have 100 constituencies where the Muslim vote can have an impact. So, what is our message to those Muslims in those communities, in those constituencies? If I have a good candidate who's been serving the constituency and who agrees, not 100%, no one agrees 100%, but agrees to a large degree with our main concerns locally in the constituency, as well as nationally across the country, as well as issues internationally, then it is important for the Muslim community to back that candidate. Okay? Now, that's one consideration, one way to say it. So I don't care whether the candidate has a chance of winning or doesn't, I vote for them because they are good. Okay? That's one way. Another way is to say, hang on, why should I lose my vote to someone who's going to lose? Has no chance of winning. Even if they're brilliant, they have no chance of winning. So I'm going to give all my votes to a losing candidate. Wouldn't it be best to see who has the chance of winning? And seeing amongst those 2 or 3 who is the best for my concerns, locally, nationally, and internationally. Who's the best? And voting for them. Notice, I haven't mentioned the single party now. I'm talking about our issues and our interests, if you wish. And seeing who, but also adding to it, who stands a chance of winning. Okay? Now, let me give you a couple of examples. I mentioned Leeds. When I was living in Leeds, my local MP was a Liberal Democrat, Chris Mulholland. He was my local MP. He was quite good. I would say that we agreed on about 50 to 60% of issues, and therefore we backed him. And if Chris Mulholland was around today and standing, I would say vote Lib Dems, because the Lib Dems, along with the Conservatives, or with Labour actually, they're the only ones who can win. In Brighton, for instance, we have Caroline Lucas, who is the current MP. And she has the greatest chances of winning. And she believes, and we agree, on something like 50 to 55, 60% of issues. So I say, back Caroline Lucas. Don't give it to Labour, because Labour won't win. Because if Caroline Lucas loses, it'll be the Tories who come in. So we need to be very careful. So that's the kind of measurement. So someone, but elsewhere, I don't say don't vote Green because they have lovely policies. No. I don't even say in my old constituency, vote Labour. No, because I believe that the Lib Dems have a greater chance and their candidate is much, much better. The Labour candidate is really, really bad. So in a way, it's a complex of issues you need to take into consideration. But you ask me why it is that I say sometimes vote for the Dems. It's, to be honest, out of the 100 constituencies, it's maybe 4 or 5 constituencies where I'm saying don't vote for Labour because either they have no chance or because their candidate is horrible. Their candidate is absolutely, absolutely horrible. Maybe out of the 100, 5, 7, something like this.
Sorry, I have one more question. How do you describe the word politics to our community? Because from your speech and my understanding, politics is a system for everyone, for entire community. But some of the people believe when it comes against their some personal, like some people believe if their income is more than 80% or 80,000 or 150,000, then they have to pay extra tax. Then they tell everyone, no, don't vote Labour. So how are you going to educate our community? Because politics we have to consider for everyone, not personally mine or the people sitting next to me.
It is, and that's why I said we are different and we think in different ways. Some of us will vote entirely on, let me give you an example. I was meeting with a family in my constituency last week, 10 days ago. This family, because one of their children is now ill, Allah protects all our children, everyone that we know. Because he's ill, they're in and out of hospital. They are going to vote entirely on the NHS and healthcare. They're going to decide. So whenever they go to hustings, whenever they speak to their MP, whenever they speak to the candidates, they say, what are you going to do about the NHS? What are you going to do about the NHS? Because they have a problem right now. Okay? Someone else who is, someone who earns a particular amount of money, they will vote upon taxation because it affects them directly. Someone who is consumed with the issue of Syria. I said to you there is a community that is very angry with Labour. It's the Syrian community. They feel that the Labour Party, over the past 8 years, has been absolutely negative when it comes to Syria. So for them, they will never vote for Labour. When I tell them Labour will look after the NHS, Labour will care for the Muslim community against Islamophobia, Labour, they don't care because they only see Syria. We are different. Other people, and I hope that we can, that I, others, yourselves, that it's not just one issue. Because every party is good on one issue. I want candidates and I want a party that is good on more than one issue, on as many issues as possible. Like I said, if a candidate agrees with me on 50%, it means they disagree with me on 50%. But if that is the case, that's good. To me, that's good. The problem is that today we have most of our MPs we differ with on 80%. And we agree on 20 or 25%. That's not good enough. We need more people whom we agree on more than 50%. 50% of them. Then we'll have a parliament, we'll have a government, inshallah, that we can have a discussion with. That we can then disagree with, but they will respect us and they will listen to us.
I have a question. I think I might get into trouble for asking you this, but if you've noticed, it's the question from the ladies that actually set the agenda today.
Yes.
And I also ask as advice. So we're doing this event in a few months' time, which is the Women's Conference. And my question is, you told us it's not important that we are civic and active just ahead of elections, but also continuous. Any advice on how, because it's going to be a major conference and there'll be a lot of inspirational speakers, how do we make sure that the design of that continues activism in the women? And in particular, because it's a women's conference, the scrutiny of it being associated with Muslims will also be even more greater. Okay.
What I would suggest, and I gave an example to a local mosque. And by the way, when I say mosques, I'm wary of the fact that 95% of mosques are registered as charities. And charities are only allowed to encourage people to vote. But they should never endorse one candidate against another. They can host all the candidates for what we call a hustings, for a discussion. But they can't endorse, they say, okay, so we will support this candidate or that. They can't, because that defies their status as charity organizations. That's just one thing I want to say. The other thing, I gave a proposed model to one of the, I wouldn't say a major, but one of the larger mosques in London. I said to them, invite all the candidates in your area for a meeting with the community. Ask them all sorts of questions. Make sure that the important questions about Islamophobia, about Palestine, about all the things you want to, about local services, ask about everything you want from all of the candidates. Whoever then wins, let's say the Tory candidate won, make sure to bring them back 3 months later, have a similar meeting, and question them on the promises they made before the elections. Tell them, have you done this? Have you done this? What have you done about this particular issue? What have you done about that? And do that every 6 months. Do that twice a year. Firstly, so that your MP knows your mosque well, so that your mosque is at the very heart of the community, so that your MP knows that when he or she come to the mosque, that they will be asked tough questions. And so when the next time we have elections, they will make absolutely sure to live up to their promises, to fulfill their pledges, to do what they said they will do. Because they know that if they don't, you will be on their backs. That you will always be asking them, why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done that? It's crucial. I would suggest you say them. Get a few candidates from various parties, especially where most of your members live. Sit with them, ask them the questions that you want to ask them about. Again, locally, nationally, and internationally. And then in that conference in February, bring them all back and say, what are you going to do now? And keep bringing them back and asking them, what have you done about your promises? That's the way how we hold these people accountable. That's how democracy works. And also, it's not just the mosque or StriveUK, but each and every member then has that kind of link with the MP or with the candidates. So it's very, very important that we know how to play politics. And this is how other communities who are politically active, that's how they act. So when an MP or a candidate meets with you, they know that you will give them a very tough ride. We're not just nice to them and give them, what do you call this, by the way? Okay. You don't just give them nice sweet tea and cutlets and such. No, no, no. You will be asking them tough questions. You will be giving them a very, very tough ride. So they need to be totally aware and absolutely adamant that they will fulfill whatever promises they make.
Question over there in the back. Can you please pass the mics? Dr. Shamim, you can ask after him.
Thank you, Dr. Anas. It's a wonderful lecture. So I have a small question. I was just impressed with quoting the ayah of Wailul Mutaffifin. I'm just going away from the election and other topics. You told that as a Muslim, we have a responsibility towards our neighborhood. And we have to start our dawah from the next door neighbor, and that is our main responsibility. So considering this aspect, and we have thousands of mosques in Britain, what we have seen is in the place where I come from, we have 4 or 5 masjids. All the mosques are a small isolated community which has a very closed approach, closed door. So you can go pray and come back, that's all. But that mosque doesn't belong to that particular community. As a leader of one of the major organizations of Muslims in Britain, do you have any policies to make the mosque or the centers as a center which is inclusive, which is good for the total community, not only Muslims, the non-Muslims also who are living in that particular community, they can rely on, they can get help or any type of service they can avail, so that they feel that mosque is part of our community. This is a necessary thing which has to exist in the society. So do you have any program in that aspect?
Over the years, we have, the problem you speak of is a widespread, virulent problem, not just in the UK, but actually across Europe. Whenever I travel, I find the same things. In America even, the same things. And some mosques were founded by, let's say, an Egyptian community. So you find it's only part of the Egyptian community. No one else can enter. Some mosques for the Pakistani community, some for the Bangladeshi community. So no one else can enter. Some are madhab. So a particular Salafi trend, for instance, or a particular Sunni trend or the such, and therefore it becomes close to anyone else. Hopefully, inshallah, we are on the way to, let's say, reducing this. We won't be able to eradicate it absolutely, but hopefully to reducing this phenomenon. We're seeing more and more mosques engage in the kind of image and model that you just drew. And we're seeing more and more Islamic centers that are catering to the entire local community, not just Muslims. And they're becoming beacons of the community as a whole. I'll give you an example, Finsbury Park Mosque. I'll give you an example, for instance, East London Mosque. I'll give you an example, West London Mosque in Ealing, here in London. I give you an example, Leeds Bram Mosque. I give you an example. So there are many, many mosques now that are actually now engaging with their local community, that they have an open door policy, that anyone can venture into the mosque at any time, watch the people praying, ask whatever questions they want, have a cup of tea, have a cup of coffee, and then walk out. Khalas, that's a place that you can visit, that you can come and sit. And this is fantastic. Just to give you an example, in Finsbury Park Mosque, one of the weekly meetings is the meeting of the local churches and synagogues. They meet inside the mosque. One of the meetings that happens once every month or once every 2 months is a meeting for the local MP or local MPs, because it caters for 2 constituencies. So Jeremy Corbyn, as well as, they have their surgeries inside the mosque. Another event that happens twice a year is Arsenal Football Club have their exhibition to recruit new players in the mosque. So these are examples of what a mosque can do and what it can cater for. This is a growing trend. It's happening slowly, unfortunately, not as quickly as we'd like it to, but more and more people, especially the young, and especially sisters, because sisters know that unfortunately till now more than 60% of mosques don't allow them in. And this needs to change. A mosque, by definition of the name, must allow everyone. If there is a mosque that says, oh, we don't allow women, or we don't allow anyone under the age of 10, or we don't allow non-Muslims, it's not a mosque anymore. It's a place where some people can pray. It's a musalla, but it's not a mosque. Al-masjid or al-jami' by definition is a place that is open for everyone. So hopefully this is happening, and inshallah soon we'll see a radical change.
Prayers will be at 1 p.m. So we will have a few minutes. So I am very sorry. This will be the last question. Dr. Shaneem will ask the last question.
Jazakallah khair, Doctor, for the great presentation. A question almost similar, but a bit more than that. You've said there are around 4 million Muslims in Britain, and majority of them are, apart from taking part in the elections, majority of them are considered them as apolitical, meaning not even responding to the press, the radio, and even just going about the day-to-day business and praying 5 times and that's it. Standing in the shoes of an average practicing Muslim, they always cater to their imams, the masjid maybe the Google sheikhs, or their own local leaders or community leaders. Is there a policy from your organization where you represent a way of educating the imams and sheikhs of this country so we can get the grassroots of the community?
Yes, Jazakallah khair. There is, and it's worked almost in the same time span as the project about opening up mosques. So yes, there is. It's not enough. We need more and more and more. Part of the problem is who gets to train the imams. You know, many of our imams believe that they speak to Allah. Allah is their boss, so no one can. But alhamdulillah, more and more, especially young imams, they're becoming open to the idea of learning about how to do these things. Many of them want to, but they don't know how. So we train, we educate, we give material, we give them tours and visits to places where there is also already an example so that they can see. And alhamdulillah, today after Salat al-Dhuhr you will have a sheikh speak to you, Sheikh Haytham Tamim, who is involved in this. So ask him this question and he will inshallah tell you about some of his activities.
Fine, thank you very much. We are wrapping up this. Just to let you know that lunch will be provided after prayers. So thank you so very much, Doctor, for spending time with us, and inshallah that we will continue to work together and also ameen for the better of our Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.